I've known for several years. He's a partner at Orr Carrington, which is one of the largest law firms in the world. He handles a lot of venture capital transactions and stuff in Silicon Valley. Richard is with Vantage Point. Vantage Point. I'm sorry, with Vantage Point. I believe an attorney as well.
Yeah, now in venture capitals.
And venture capitalists as well. Neil Pandy, he is a director at Ipx Aerospace. He has the distinct advantage of having been through this process as well. He started his company Transcender, where he was the one doing the actual programming when he first started the company and helped build it to a very large company. Dr. Jacques Valet, who I believe has also been on the board of Bigelow Aerospace, or Bigelow Aerospace. He is with SBV Partners. He's done a variety of different transactions, in venture capital transactions in biotech and software. Mohanjit Jolly is managing director at Garage Technology Ventures, one of the leading firms in Silicon Valley. The man who deserves most of the recognition here is Amaresh. Amaresh screened all these business plans, coached these guys, really was the glue that helped put this plan together. He is currently on leave from Accenture and has a lot of experience in biotech, where he thinks there's a lot of similarities in the early days from biotech that he's seen. He also has an MBA from Columbia. And our last judge is Lee Valentine. Lee is an active angel investor. He's also executive vice president for the Space Study Institute, and in his spare time, he's also a practicing emergency room physician. So without further ado, though, what we will, the format that we will have is we have a 10-minute presentation and then 5 to 8 minutes of questions from the judges. And so I guess to start then, the first one will be Ipx Entertainment and Rocky Pursued.
Okay, thank you, Rich. Is my presentation available? Okay, that's not it. This works. Okay, Ipx Entertainment. We're a space sports entertainment company. Does this flip the next slide, please? We're aimed at applying a mature business model to exploit new space markets. So we're looking at the entertainment world to exploit space flight and tourism. One thing we know now is that we can mass market the new space industry before the ability to enter space is available and affordable for commercial use by using parabolic zero-gravity flights for sports-based entertainment. Next slide, please. Does this work? No, this thing. Where is that? That's one back. Okay. So we're developing the world's first team-based zero-gravity sport modeled on U.S. football. We want to create a sports league starting with 8 teams across the globe, and we know we can bring this to orbit with little alteration. And we're going to train and choose the athletes using a reality TV show under the name Space Champions. So the game, zero-gravity football, would be played in a Boeing 727 provided by the Zero Gravity Corporation. And it would have to feature it would have to use the situation at hand, the fact that zero gravity can be only provided but for 25 to 30 seconds for each parabolic arc. If we together 40 or 60 arcs, we can have a half hour of game time in zero gravity. There are other details that we're working on are proprietary until we can premiere the show, so I don't want to talk about too much of the rules. Next. Okay, the sports industry would be, Zero Gravity Football would compete with traditional sports for the attention of the sports fan, but may generate interest in the non-sports fan for the novelty factor. The revenue streams would come from television advertising and distribution revenue, sponsorship and licensing, initial team franchises, and annual franchise fees. The possible customers for teams that we're going to sell are investors who want to own a team themselves, the other sports entertainment companies, or other new space companies. Because we are looking to create a market for space-based sports, those companies who perhaps happen to have a space station company or a rocket company would have an economic interest in seeing something like this succeed, because we would create a cultural shift in the world where this sort of thing was considered and desired, and people want to go to space themselves. So for us to become their customer, they might want to become our customer at first. It's just the same way this morning Lon Levin spoke about how Hughes satellite company invested in the XM radio. Okay. The television industry has, in the last several years, has made popular reality TV shows. It's now dominating the TV market with engaging more than 1.6 billion viewers in 2001 data. We know we can create compelling TV dramas when there are exciting challenges for the players, the personalities of the contestants themselves, and the element of chance is all in there. And with Zero Gravity Sports, we can do that. We actually started, put out a casting call a few months ago and got some interest from a variety of athletes, including a professional football player from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. If you look at the revenue from a typical reality TV show, these numbers are actually based on the average advertising dollars coming from an hour-long TV show. If you multiply it by 16, you'll get the expected revenue from the average performing show on that particular. If you take the average of averages, there you get almost $55 million based on the 1999 numbers. Now, that's for broadcast television. What I found is that broadcast television collects about 41 cents per viewer for any of its shows, or the average show. But if you look on the online and video on demand and peer-to-peer networks, with companies like iTunes is pulling in $1.99 per viewer and claiming 39 cents of it for Apple. So they're making almost as much as a broadcaster. The result is the broadcasters are rushing into the broadband market as we speak, and just in the last 6 months they've been doing this. So if you consider those numbers, IPXN has a 5-to-1 advantage for distributing Space Channel TV over broadcast. We have our own website called spacechannel.tv where we can deliver through peer-to-peer networks our content. So a 16 episodes of a $10 million budget reality show would require only 312,500 viewers to break even. To match the projected U.S. broadcast revenue, we only need 1.7 viewers of a worldwide audience. If we project a modest target of 500,000 viewers, then we'll do very well for our first year of operations. Broadcasters, if we license to them, will want to aim to keep as much as possible. For example, Mark Burnett has produced reality shows like Survivor and The Apprentice. He's also produced a boxing reality show called The Contender, where he obtained a 33% stake of the ad revenue. I believe sports leagues like the, if you want to call it a league, the World Wrestling Entertainment gets 50% or more of the revenue. But by having our own online video channel, IPXN can retain 100% of the advertising revenue, only have to get 1/5 of the audience to generate the same gross revenue numbers as broadcasters. So to get 50% of, if we were aiming for a similar deal or Mark Burnett does, like 50%, we only need 1/10 of the audience. For the same size U.S. audience, for the average show on the average network of 8.5 million viewers, the potential online revenue is $272 million. Worldwide, that's difficult to predict, but the sky isn't limiting. Competition is other companies, large existing entertainment or sports companies who have not, in evidence, entered into this market so far, and are probably lacking the imagination and the relationships to do themselves until someone else does it first. The other potential competition are actually potential partners. The Zero Gravity Corporation are not liquid enough to do this themselves, so if they were interested in doing this, they would have to raise the capital as well. But I have a very good relationship with them right now, and the refusal to do this sort of team-based sport. Space Adventures would be a potential competitor. They have access to a lot of capital and are developing 2 spaceports where zero-gravity flights may be offered. They are potentially a great partner to work with to expand the zero-gravity sports league overseas. So the story so far, we've obtained financing for the development of Space Channel TV. The site has been created and launched on April 16th. It needs content, but we have many things in the work, aside from these sports entertainment products. The distribution and encryption technology for the video files has been tested, and the Space Channel video player has been developed, a custom player where viewers would be able to get access to our programs and not be able to pirate it without a great deal of difficulty. We produced a film, a Mars training expedition in Utah, a documentary called Crew 44. It's going to premiere in late August. And right now, we're looking for the right employees and investors to bring into the business. That's it. Questions, please?
Have you had any discussions with the networks, whether it's Fox, CBS?
I haven't begun discussions yet. I have some good contacts. One of the people who want to work for me works for Fox right now, and he's trying to develop a relationship with Fox Sports so we can approach them. But so right now we're considering we're going to approach distributors to get that into networks. What I found with the ad revenue is, and what entertainment companies have found, is that online offering your programs online erode their broadcast market, so it's worthwhile to do both. Yes?
At a tactical level, can you talk a little bit about what the game would be, how many people, duration,
right,
support staff
right,
in zero-G can be challenging?
Sure. Okay, we're thinking about 40 to 60 arcs. We have to test the game first, just to make sure exactly how many arcs are long enough to make an exciting game. Each down would be 25 to 30 seconds long, and we have to decide how many downs a team gets before the control of the ball switches to the other team, or they win control again. You can't exactly tackle in zero gravity, but we're going to do something else. For scoring, for instance, you just have to get your players into the end zone, and the ball is actually used to tag people out. And that way we can keep the game played for the entire 30 seconds of the weightlessness, rather than ending it after the first 5 seconds that somebody might score. So we want a continual scoring, like in basketball, so to keep it fast-paced. Yes?
why do you consider the sports business to be a competitor to you? You know, Maserati doesn't compete with a Chevy. It competes with a fur coat or a diamond necklace or something like that. You're somewhat unique in that whole category. Also, you have no public there. I mean, part of the excitement of football is you have 70,000 people screaming there.
Yeah.
In your case, it'll be just the players and the television camera.
Right. Well, most of the revenue for sports does come from the television rights, depending on the sports league. But the live audience there doesn't. It's not a significant chunk of the revenue. So your question was why am I comparing to sports entertainment? Because they have the talent probably to do something like this. Yes.
Is there content on the space TV?
There's let's see, not paid content. We have a few deals in the works to get some content from various sources that will be paid. The channel works actually by a unique patent pending system that we have, so that viewers can actually watch ads and tokens to pay for the programs they watch, or they pay directly to IPXN to buy those tokens.
Are you tracking viewership, and is that relevant at this point? If there, I don't know if there's enough content to make that.
There's not enough content right now, but we can easily able to track the viewership. Yes.
You have not mentioned the management team and their backgrounds.
Yeah,
How are
I
you going
didn't.
to run this?
I didn't get to that. I think that's the next slide. But management team is myself as president and executive producer of the show. As vice president of sales and marketing would be Anton James. He has about 12 years of experience in sales and marketing with large corporations, managing billion-dollar contracts and small startups and all sorts of things like that. There's there's a sound technician at Fox that wants work. I need the money to be able to hire people, primarily a sales and marketing team to sell the sponsorships that will need to do this. And a production studio can be hired. Thank you.
All right, so next up will be Michael Mealing from Mastin Space Systems.
Okay, great. I'm Michael Mealing with Mastin Space Systems. I'm the CFO. Mastin Space Systems is a vertical takeoff landing suborbital spacecraft developer. Our vision is based on the fact that we believe the DCX proved that VTVL spacecraft can be operated like an airplane, and due to that, we are developing our own at a price per launch that we think disruptively creates new markets such as affordable K-12 space science, amateur space-based astronomy, point-to-point cargo delivery, and eventually space tourism. The problem that we've identified is there are several very served markets that currently cannot access any space service at all. The only space they get to access is what they watch on TV in a voyeuristic fashion. What we would like to do is be able to lower the price to a point where they can actually be involved and therefore create new markets. This is an example animation of our flight video to give you an idea of how our vehicle works, the operational characteristics that allow us to reach that price. As you can see here, we have very little need for ground support equipment. We can fly from pretty much anywhere, very low, very fast turnaround times. We take off vertically, reach between 120 kilometers and up to 500 kilometers with a lot of different options in that flight. This example right here is a Earth observation mission where the intent is to reach just above the edge open the payload bay, and allow the payload to have a view of the Earth. And as you see here, the payload bay can open up. We have options to pressurize the payload bay, eject payloads, allow payloads to view space, to do space-based astronomy. We can also close the payload bay and provide pressurized environment for life sciences payloads. And then we re-enter tail first. Once we have reached terminal velocity, we reignite our engines and come in for a soft landing where we took off from. And as you can see, we land very close to where we took off from and can refuel the vehicle and fly again with about a 4-hour time, allowing us to fly multiple missions per day. The only really limitation is the integration time of a given payload. Allows us to do survey-type science where you fly multiple times a day to do an experiment over and over again. The next slide. There we go. The aspects of a VTVL that allow us to do this are the fact you can return. Landing configuration is very similar to takeoff configuration, so your turnaround time is low. That allows you to get high flight rates, which actually produces the economy of scales necessary to create this reduced cost. Over time, once we get beyond this initial flight vehicle, we do intend on doing humans to suborbit for suborbital tourism, cargo to orbit eventually, and then humans to orbit, doing a 2-stage orbit approach. Our business model is very similar to launch companies. We a fee per flight. We also have other revenue streams in terms of licensing our technology, licenses for payload manuals, and some of the other technology that payloads would need to be able to do to build kits and other. One of the things about our industry is that because of the cost of the access to space, the launch providers end up being one of the gatekeepers of the emerging space industry. The market segments that we are approaching in order of priority that we're going after, we believe that K through 20 education is going to be one of our larger market segments, about 40% of our revenue. That market segment has very short lead times, usually sometimes in the order of weeks, definitely less than a year. The existing market is non-existent, and we believe that based on pre-sales that we have made and market surveys, this is going to be our largest market segment. After that comes NASA-funded research. That area has very long lead times, so it affects when that revenue actually ends up getting booked. Non-NASA research, which is university-level research, but also hobbyists, aerospace contractors looking to test articles at very low costs, are also significant revenues, but those are in a little bit longer sales lead times than education. We also are expecting a heavy initial market, but we expect that market to disappear after about 6 months of our first flights, given our flight rate, because one of our intentions is to make space accessible so the novelty does eventually wear off. But there are sub-niches of that market, such as cremated remains to space, memorial space flights, things like that, that do present an ongoing market. The forecasts that we have do not include international and eventual space tourism because of the R&D required and the time horizon on the market forecasts, but international interest in the business is significant and pretty much is actually higher than domestic interest, but is difficult to break into because of ITAR uncertainties. We feel that we can break through those, but given the uncertainties, we didn't put that into our in our financial projections. Tourism is something we get into in 2009 and 2010, and equally the uncertainties there and the time horizon, we don't include that in the upcoming projections. Without getting into too much detail, considering who else is in the room, this is our view of our forecasted EBITDA. As you can see in 2012, just based on suborbital cargo alone, we're looking at about 9.4 million per year EBITDA just on that product line. As you can tell, 2006 and 2007 is most of our revenue. One of the biggest issues in this industry is the cost of insurance. So we have some significant initial losses on our first few flights to be able to get insurance costs down, but that gets recovered very quickly. Our competition, as many here in the room would probably know most of these names, Blue Origin, run by Jeff Bezos, very quiet but some deep pockets. Virgin Galactic, which right now is partnering with Scaled Composites and the Spaceship Company, but we eventually view them as a customer, hopefully being able to sell them vehicles as well. SpaceX, going directly to orbit. Zig Aerospace, which presented earlier today, is one of the other VTVL competitors and is actually one of our competitors in the Lunar Lander Challenge this fall. Xcore Aerospace, which is my friend right here to the right, and one of our neighbors in Mojave, is developing a Xeris suborbital space plane. They have significant revenue from SBIRs and subcontracts from Prime, so they are revenue positive these days. Rocket Plane is developing a suborbital vehicle based on Learjet, and TGV, which is another VTVL developer besides us, Armadillo and Blue Origin, but we feel that they're going after a completely different market segment than we're planning on going. Our management team is David Mastin, who was formerly with Cisco Systems and has funded the company to date. Myself, I am VP for Business Development and CFO. Came from VeriSign. We have our three main engineers, Jonathan Goff from BYU with an aerospace engineering degree, and Pierce Nichols and Ian Moore are our main engineers. We do have interns that come through from time to time, but this is pretty much our management team. Right now, we're a five-person shop. Our capital requirements over the next few years, $3 million gets us to profitability, pays for continuing R&D headcount, adding a few more engineers, materials and subcontracts for building and testing production vehicles, marketing and sales campaigns, and a small additional sales staff, and filings and several other consultancies that we intend on hiring to help us with some of the regulatory aspects. Eventually, when we get in the out years, when we go after suborbital tourism and orbital development, we're looking at follow-on series and investment rounds. Exit in this industry is pretty much expected to be M&A. Hopefully, one of the primes will buy us one day. Our current status, we are complete with our vernier engine development. XA 0.1 hold down tests are next week. We are working toward being a X-Prize Lunar Lander Challenge participant, which is this fall, October 20th and 21st in Las Cruces, New Mexico. We have filed our permit applications with the FAA and expect to hear something from them very shortly. We have begun pre-sales about 3 months ago and are getting significant interest and pre-sales from the K through 12 and several other interesting customers, and negotiating channel partner agreements, and we moved to Mojave to begin our testing. And that is the end of my slides. Ready for questions? Thank you.
Wonder if you can comment quickly on the reusability of the launch craft. Meaning, I understand that to keep launch costs very low. To keep very low, I would imagine that the reusability factor is fairly high. Maybe specifically to the engines or other components. Any comments relative to that?
Sure. This vehicle is meant to operate like a general aviation aircraft. The engines, our engineering process is optimized for operations lifetime before we ever get into performance or exotic thrust, exotic propellants. We picked LOX isopropyl alcohol for the availability and cheapness. The engines are built for hundreds of cycles before we do maintenance. We expect to have a small fleet of vehicles, mostly for being able to pre-position them in different spaceports around the country as opposed to having to have large amounts of spares. Given our flight rate of being able to do 8 flights per day, you can see why that vehicle has to be as reliable, and the intent is the limitation on our ground loading time is how fast we load liquid oxygen. That's the only thing that really limits us. We don't do any maintenance on the ground except once every 100 flights or 50 flights or something like that. So it's very much like general aviation or the commercial aviation industry.
And given that there are half a dozen or so fairly, in some cases well-funded or fundable competitors in the space, what's going to make Mastin stand out? And if part of the answer is this 25K cost basis, you know, per flight, per launch, why couldn't they sort of use some of the best practices and compete on that basis as well?
Two answers specifically. One is, in addition to the 25,000, we are also for suborbital vehicle. Given that we do not have wings, and no offense to Rich over here, we're going to be targeting 500, which is usually five times higher than pretty much most of our competitors in terms of our altitude. So for suborbital tourism, that means you have a much better view. We can also have a much more linger time for microgravity experiments. At that altitude, you can do, there are specific astronomy experiments that you have to do at those kind of altitudes to get above the atmosphere significantly enough. So we feel that that is one of our competitive advantages, that we're planning on going much higher than most of our competitors. It's speed to market. Our first commercial flights are scheduled for next summer. Because we are not going after suborbital tourism, it's easier for us to go to market with a cheaper product, with a broader base of customers that we can then train and have pre-positioned to know our brand and know who we are and trust us, to be able to then graduate to the suborbital tourism market later. So we feel that we can actually start commercial service next year, whereas most of our competitors are still looking at suborbital tourism for follow-on years, the market and our altitude. And the channel agreements and the exclusivity we're negotiating there is one of the other aspects of it.
When I think of Cisco, I think of a company that makes routers.
Mm-hmm.
They also make digital phones and other things that sort of look like routers, but they don't make anything else outside of their business target. When I think of the things that you've described, it seems to me a company that flies to the limit of space is going to be very different from a company that does what you showed us in that video, which was a great video, by the way. But it needs, you know, life support systems. It needs a very different kind of marketing, very different kind of liability. Everything else is different.
Yes.
Why are you chasing two rabbits?
We don't really consider them too different in terms of just simply launching mass. We are a truck. We are going to be partnering with other companies that can actually start to help us build the pressure vessels for the suborbital tourism. There's some people in the room that actually design suborbital tourism class cabins. And so we're looking to find, well, eventually when we get there, looking to find a partner to do the suborbital tourism part specific to that market segment, and we will fly that as mass. The requirements for example, life science require a pressurized cargo bay to be able to do the kind of cargo experiments. So expanding that up, really for us, it's just taking the existing vehicle and making it being able to throw more mass. And that's a standard engineering extension. But we will be working with those channel partners to buffer us from the differences in those markets. So we're looking for example, one of the reasons we don't exactly view Virgin as a competitor is we would like them to handle the entire tourism market. We just fly whatever they want to fly.
Thank you.
Any other ones? Nope. Great. Thank you.
Next up is Jeff Klagenberg with General Orbital.
Hello, I'm Jeff Klagenberg, CEO of General Orbital, makers of the next generation airships. Oops. There it is. Get rid of the menu. So the airships that we're going to be building are capable of sustained flight at 60 to 100,000 feet in maintaining a fixed position over the Earth. And they're used to provide, they can be used to provide communication and observation services in lieu of more expensive and often less effective solutions such as satellites. Okay. And these airships also will provide the basis for the best platform for transporting passengers from the Earth's surface to orbit. So why would we do this? The market is showing us a growing need for communication systems throughout Asia and other remote places where an existing land-based communication infrastructure simply doesn't exist. And unfortunately, we're also seeing an increasing interest in emergency communications and observation services and security solutions worldwide. And finally, we're also seeing very interesting developments in new markets involving Earth resource mapping with companies like Google, Microsoft, and even now Apple and Yahoo are coming up with products in this space. So our base product, the airship, is capable, as I said, of high altitude flight in either an unmanned or manned configuration and can stay on station for up to 2 years, providing a platform for communication or observation. We've even seen some interest in adventure travel, so high altitude tourism. And we've even had some discussions with one company interested in using an airship for high altitude skydiving. I won't be joining that flight. As a communication observation platform, something the military is referring to as a SkySat, this vehicle can be used for regional communications and has capabilities in terms of disaster or emergency use. If you could imagine what would have happened if this would have been available in post-Katrina New Orleans. It also is usable for events such as the Olympics or Burning Man, where you want to augment communication services. And very interesting to us, it's available as a geosync replacement, where as a permanent replacement for communication services in lieu of a geosync satellite. As a matter of fact, we responded to a proposal from the company Astro Research, which was looking to do exactly this for a city in Japan. And we've submitted that proposal, and that's yet to be awarded. One thing to keep in mind when you think of this as a communication platform, any satellite-based communication payload will work on our platform, but also terrestrial-based communication systems will work because we're close enough to the Earth. So Wi-Fi, cellular phone coverage, those are also available from this vehicle. And finally, in addition to the communication services, there's observation. So it can be used for things such as real-time traffic visualization, Earth resource mapping, or security applications, which can include early wildfire detection or border patrol. And when we talk about regional, we're not talking a small footprint. As you can see, our customers would have access to that could cover San Francisco to LA to Las Vegas. I just wanted to show a couple quick pictures of work that our CTO and co-founder, Dr. Alfred Differ, had worked on, showing airships that had actually been built and manufactured and flown that he worked on. That was a vehicle that had been built as a Battle Lab project, and this is a very early proof of concept flight. Now, the airship is something we'd immediately be going to market, and the space vehicle is a part of our system that would be, that's in design phase now, and we'd be doing R&D and start work in about 5 years on. This is a very unique hybrid of a rocket and airship design. It would launch from 60,000 feet to low Earth orbit, and it has an incredible advantage for carrying passengers. It has a very gentle launch and reentry characteristic. Passengers would experience no more than 2 Gs of acceleration in a very low vibration environment. Compared to a traditional capsule or glide vehicle reentry that would expose passengers to potentially over 5 Gs of acceleration. This just provides a much friendlier experience to people and to potentially delicate equipment. Now, showing how these two vehicles would work together very quickly. Vehicles, I said, would be maintained at 60,000 feet. The airship would be used to lift passengers or payload up to the space vehicle. The space vehicle would then fire its rocket engines, lifting it into orbit. And then when the mission is over, you'd fire a deorbit burn and re-enter landing, quote unquote, at 60,000 feet. If you still have passengers on board at that point, you would use the airship to get them down. So understanding the value, there's current existing markets that we would be tapping into. There's the unmanned aerial vehicle market. That's the security applications that we talked about for military communication and observation. I'm going to go into a little more detail on the competition slide. Satellite services and manufacturing markets, $60 billion and $10 billion market respectively. We would be tapping into part of that market with the geosync replacement idea. So the growth in that satellite manufacturing is expected over the next few years. We'd be able to capture a small percentage of that by replacing those new vehicles with our SkySat configuration. And our airship vehicles are about $10 million a pop. They're far more cost effective than any geosync satellite out there. And finally, the launch services, about $2.8 billion a year. Clearly, most of us believe that there will be growth in the space tourism market on the launch services side, and we fully expect that our space vehicle, with its very good passenger experience, will be able to capture a significant portion of that. So our sales plan that we've built as part of our business plan, we've been very conservative in estimating that we would sell only 20 of the airships, and we've only included the airships in our planning over the next 5 years. At $10 million a vehicle, we have a very large set of prospective customers we can approach with this. The communication service providers, such as Astro Research, like I said, or even those providing services for events. Governments for security, emergency, fire detection, applications, border patrol. It's important to note that it's not only national governments that we could be applicable to, but state and even local large city governments. And finally, there's the Earth observation side. As Google, Microsoft try to find ways to make their websites more compelling, one of the areas that we're promoting is the idea of including real-time Earth observation data. So this is a rollout of the bookings projections based on those sales assumptions. I did include in these booking projections estimates for up to 70% discount on the first vehicles to accelerate sales. Cost projections, as you can see, are very reasonable, and these are built assuming, of course, those bookings. In the competition, you have the UAV market. Of course, their next generation vehicles are very interesting. UAVs are very applicable anytime you need high mobility or you need to get close to the ground. But if you're looking at applications such as border patrol or fire detection, where you want permanent installations, an airship that does not require continual control from the ground or the expense of continual expense of fuel is a much better solution. So we expect to capture that portion of the market. And there are, of course, airship and other large aerospace manufacturers that will provide direct competition. I didn't go into detail with them, but basically, most of their products are optimized for low altitude flight, even if being pushed into service at high altitude. So to be cost effective, they would need to redevelop technology similar to ours. And of course, we already have patents pending for the airship and the space vehicle. In fact, we're in the internationalization process for it. The funding we're looking to get is basically to fund the sales and the construction of the demonstration vehicle. And you can see the notes there. With our plan, we'd be cash flow positive in 3 years and have about 20 million cash on hand, accounts receivable after 5. I'll go ahead and, if you have any questions, that's the end of my 1,000-foot view of the company.
Yes. Could you talk about how you're going to satisfy the energy requirements to keep these vehicles in the sky?
The vehicles take advantage of solar power. The nice thing about being an airship is they have a very large surface area for we can deploy on solar power. As a matter of fact, we have about an excess of 1 kilowatt of power to provide to the payload. So we provide the payload not only a platform, but power as well.
How far along are you in your development cycle?
In terms of the final design for the airships we have in place, we've not started construction of the demonstration vehicle. And over the last few months, I've been focusing more on the sales channel. I've been building up a pipeline, in order to get to that first sale. But basically, as soon as we got the first customer turned on, we would go into production unless we get funding.
Can you talk a little bit about the approvals involved in getting something like this off the ground? And what is a launch process? How would you launch one of these things?
Well, these are launched as any other airship would be, in terms of the airship vehicle. And that's actually fairly known. You basically move an airship out of a hangar, you then go up to altitude with the vehicle and then move it into whatever station that you want. It would be flown, the first vehicles would be flown as experimental vehicles under the FAA, and depending on the package, we would either need our customer or we would have to go for FCC approval for transmission if it was a compact payload. So.
At that altitude, are you above the jet stream?
At that altitude, we're above significant winds. That's one of the reasons that we chose that milieu, is that it's, and we could, of course, adjust it appropriate to the application, but we're above significant weather. So one of the challenges airships in the past have had, of course, is at low altitude, they're very sensitive to the weather that can exist. By operating at high altitude, we avoid that.
Jeff, given the recent successes of Bigelow over the last week, I just want to draw the comparison. What limitations, or are there any, of taking the manned aircraft and making or creating that into a permanent LEO station?
Well, in terms of our spacecraft itself, doesn't necessarily bring up a whole lot of mass. It's being built around the idea of actually to support something like Bigelow, but it's not going to be a substitute for a high-mass launch vehicle. And obviously, in a space station environment, that's what you would want. We definitely see Bigelow as a potential target partner or customer of ours.
I'll ask one more. In terms of your overall funding need, how much do you think is it? And my guess is it's probably more than the $2 million that you showed in the slide. So where is the rest going to come from? Is it a prepayment?
Yeah, the discussions that I've been going down would be a prepayment with the first customer to get through that first construction. I also, the $1 million in terms of construction would depend on how much prepayment that they would be willing to do.
You haven't said much about the management team.
Well, actually, because I only had 10 minutes, I have to admit, I hid the management slide after. Oh, there we go. How do I go to previous? Yeah, take me back one. So I'm Jeff Klagenberg, the CEO. My background comes from, in the aerospace community, I worked at Lockheed for about 8 years, did my time there, then jumped into the software startup market with companies like Telarium, which got acquired by Tibco, and then most recently a company called Cyperion. Dr. Alfred Differ, our CTO and co-founder, dedicated about a decade of his life in terms of aerospace technology, airship technology and space sciences. David King, who is a guy out of Cisco with a great amount of experience in the purchasing and the operation side of the business. And we have the great fortune of having the support of Dr. Art Dula in terms of our executive council, giving us intellectual property and an incredible understanding of space law. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, so next up is David Gregory from Zig Aerospace. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to try to spend the next 10 minutes talking about why I think one of the big things in terms of commercial space that's coming down the line is actually a small thing. So specifically, I'm talking about the nanosat market, and even though it exists right now, there's a supply problem because the launch industry is focused elsewhere for lots of reasons. And so the Zig plan, our vision is to supply the nanosat market with the world's smallest orbital launch vehicle. So about the market, the graph there is launches of satellites less than 20 kilograms in the last 5 years, and the nanosat market has gone from, as you can see, just a handful of launches 5 years ago to the point that next week, as some of you may know, there's a scheduled launch in Russia on a converted ICBM of 15 CubeSats from academia and I believe a couple of commercial companies. And those, you know, all the kinds of things you expect to see from small satellites. The market this year is about $2.5 million. It's a little hard to pin down depending on how you count the costs in terms of launching in Russia. Is it just the launch costs and whatnot? And we think that in years that market could easily be $8 million for lots of reasons. Standards development, miniaturization of electronics. You can do a lot more with a lot less these days than you could just 5 years ago. And then hopefully we can provide some supply stability and address the market in such a way that it can grow. Next slide, please. So how did we get to where we are today with the nanosat market? The graph there, you can see that obviously, as we all know, most of the satellites that are launched are big. In this case, between 2,000 and 6,000 kilograms. That's, you know, weighs more than 100 and on up. So those are very big, and the smallest launch vehicle available in the United States has a payload of about 375 kilograms. And, you know, as a result, if you want to launch a 1 to 3 kilogram satellite, you have to share a ride. And so obviously the guy that's paying $11 million gets a lot more say in when you launch, where you launch, and those kinds of things. But despite that, there is still clearly almost a bifurcated market there with a significant number of launches at the small end of the spectrum. So what's our strategy? Basically, to play the pun, it's an economy of scale. We're going to build a small vehicle to address this specific market. And obviously, small vehicles are cheaper to develop, they're cheaper to operate, they're cheaper to set up, they launch faster, all those kinds of things. And we think we can do it for a reasonable price. Start small, servicing basically a single P-pod or a 5 kilogram satellite, and go up from there to do the whole range from 20 kilograms down. And then ultimately in 5 years have the highest launch rate in the industry and the lowest cost per launch, almost an order of magnitude less than what's available now to orbit. So the competition, obviously everybody knows the first three names there, and their business model: tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, federal government contracts, communication contracts. There's some new vehicles in the pipe, one that everybody's heard of, and one that maybe not so many people have heard of, from Alliant Tech Systems. But those are still very big, addressing this market. You know, several hundred kilograms, 400 to in that range. And then, you know, the space startup companies, which have a pretty different business model on the whole, but they're no slackers. And if they decided they wanted to compete in this market, I'm sure they could. So our financial plan, basically it's based around 2-year development
schedule. At the end of FY3, we would be, sorry, I come from the government, that's fiscal year 3. We would be cash flow positive and hope to have, at the end of 5 years, about 40% of that market that we think there will be at $3 million in sales. Okay, so where we are. We have what we think is a mature design concept. We have a well-defined path to how we're going to start with a small project and go all the way to orbit. And we don't have, if you look, when we look at our development plan, we don't see any big boxes that say miracle happens here, and then we have a rocket. And what we've been working on lately is some hyperpropellant performance testing to get some data that you just can't find. It's not published. It's not that it doesn't exist. It's just not available on the open literature. So the management team, and I don't know how much time I have. Okay. Myself, my current professional experience is I was at the Naval Surface Warfare Center as a civil servant, working on the Aegis Ballistic Missile Defense Program. I was working on the team that was responsible for the terminal guidance propulsion system for the hit-to-kill warhead. In graduate school, I did research for NASA on air-breathing propulsion technologies for space launch applications, RBCC and RBCC. My partner, Jason Liu, currently at Craft Tech, excuse me, which is a small company outside of Philly, also worked on the Aegis program, doing performance envelope missile performance analysis. He's a testing guy. And then Dr. Heister from Purdue University. So what we're looking at here, we're currently raising our first round of capital, our angel round of $150,000. And what we will get out of that is a year, within a year, we will have flight tested a prototype module which demonstrates all the major subsystems that we need to build an orbital vehicle. The second round we would raise after we'd completed that flight testing and demonstrated our technology, and 3 years to integrate the prototype into an orbital vehicle and get to the point where we're making more money than we are spending. And so to wrap it all up, I mean, the vision here is that we're going to develop the world's smallest space launch vehicle. It's an orbital vehicle, so that the nanosat market can mature to the point where it can mature to its full potential, because I think it's really stymied right now, because if you're a company, I don't think you can go to an investor and say, well, I have this great idea for launching a satellite in orbit, but I don't know when it'll go, and I don't know where it's going to go, and it might take 2 or 3 years. So hopefully, with this kind of capability, the smaller than 10 kilogram satellites can really become, true commercial projects where you see constellations and things like that. Thank you.
Assuming you can meet your projections in 5 years, what's the company worth at that point?
Well, I must admit I'm an engineer and not an accountant, so as far as I can tell, evaluating valuation of a company is a very subjective thing. So honestly, you probably know better than I do. I'm sure you know better than I do.
So you creating a new market or going after an existing market that is not served appropriately?
The second option. I think, you know, clearly there's 25 nanosats going to be launched this year, and I think given the choice, a U.S. entity that wanted to launch one would much rather launch with a U.S. launcher because of ITAR and all the issues of launch with an entity that's all the way on the other side of the world in a different country. And so my personal opinion is that if the supply was there, a new market would emerge. But we're not creating a new market. I mean, the market is there. And I think I think we can be profitable even if a new market doesn't emerge.
Why is it then that the question may sound kind of awkward, but why is it that it's only an $8 million market in 5 years if, you know, if it's an existing market and presumably growing with, you know, with folks like yourselves? Is that because you're not pricing it properly, that you're leaving money on the table and you should be charging more because the pain is there?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Or it's just that it's fewer it's basically academia that's interested in those types of experiments?
Basically, yes. I think that I hate to sound trite, but I'm a kind of cautious guy, and so you know, my projection there is based on, you know, the current market growing. And I think we're not trying to compete on price with the Russians because I think that's a losing game. So it's not that we're undercharging. It's just that if you take a look at the market that's there now today and you extrapolate out, you know, you get $8 million.
There seems to be, I think in the years that follow, I'm a firm believer that nanosat technology will continue to grow drastically, not only within academia, but also in the commercial sector. But there are plenty of ideas of companies and others that are thinking through the launch aggregator business, meaning that they would aggregate launch demand from academia, from commercial entities worldwide, and allocate that demand to launch companies such as the commercial SpaceX, Sea Launch, and the Russian entities. So given that a lot of nanosat technologies could be used in very large constellations on the order of tens or even hundreds of nanosats performing certain functions, and the application list goes on and on, do you foresee that companies with larger payload capacities such as SpaceX or Sea Launch and the like would also become more competitive in the nanosat market because they're launching 100 or more nanosats versus the 1 or 2? Launch aggregators can help funnel demand so that the customer themselves, a nanosat customer, doesn't have to wait for launches but can actually follow a set schedule.
Sure, I think there's a lot of complex issues in that question. Gee, where to start? One of them is that one of the laws of engineering and rockets in particular, and if anybody with me, they can talk to me outline, but is that a bigger system costs more to develop. And I don't mean, obviously it costs more, but it costs more per whatever metric you want to use, pound, thrust, whatever it is. And that's an observed law of engineering. And so it's always cheaper to develop something smaller first. There's also the issue you are putting a constellation up. Some constellations can be put up where you launch 100 satellites on one rocket, but there are some where you can't do that. If you're trying to get global coverage of the Earth, it's kind of hard to do that with one rocket and 100 nanosatellites. So you really need more launches. And there was one other point I don't remember out of your question, but.
What more can you tell us to give us confidence that your company has the ability to build this vehicle?
I'm sorry, I missed the very beginning of the question.
What more can you tell us to give us confidence that your company can build this launch vehicle?
Is the question what makes us special or what makes the idea special?
You can tell us both.
Okay. Well, the idea, the thing that's special about the idea is I think we have a plan that borrows on some history, and I won't go into too many nitty-gritty details, but I really feel strongly that we have a good plan that, that you start with small concrete successes, and eventually it goes forward. I mean, one of the problems you see with some of the projects is they do this, and that doesn't really, I mean, it's neat and it's cool, and it does, you work, but it doesn't get you farther to where you want to go. And so I think our plan is special in that. The management, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you other than, it's what we have experience. I don't claim that the team is complete. I really think there are some components missing there, and definitely a lot of the work will be subbed in some way or another. Not a lot, but some. We're not going to bend metal ourselves, pay people to fab, that kind of things. So I won't stand up here and tell you that that we're going to do all ourselves and we're going to be great and wonderful about it. But I think we can do it. Aside from that, I don't really know what to tell you.
There were two things that I really liked about your plan. One is you only do one thing. To a lot of companies in this business that are going to do this, that, and the other thing, and everything else.
I like that too.
And that begins to look like something that venture capitalists like, it's focused. Okay. The second thing is that I thought there was a large pent-up demand for this kind of thing because the shuttle has been unavailable for a long time. A lot of things were designed to be flown the last 5 years and really haven't. The schedule hasn't permitted to fly them. And also, as someone mentioned here, for those of us who track nanotechnology, there's a lot of things that are becoming possible now with a 5 kilogram or 10 kilogram satellite that before would have been. And also, yes, there are larger vehicles that are available where you could put lots of satellites, but the insurance company isn't going to let you put your little experiment next to $250 million communication satellite. They'll never let you do that. So those launches are just not available. And it will, you will be filling a, maybe I'm rewriting your business plan here on the fly, but you'd be filling a very interesting niche. I just not smart enough to know how big it can get. But once you're there, you may reveal a pent-up demand that just isn't, hasn't been quantified.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with everything you say. It's just that a lot of that you don't really have evidence for, so I tend not to try to say things that aren't defensible. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the real potential is that this could really open up a very large market that's sort of being suppressed. And but I think the real strength is that our business plan doesn't depend on that market opening.
So if you were funded, who is the next person you would hire?
A controls engineer, probably.
As opposed to a marketing
Well,
person?
I mean, in our first year, it's a development, it's an engineering exercise. So I don't foresee an immediate need for a marketing person. Your comment, Jacques, reminded me of the issue with putting lots of satellites together is you have to make sure that they don't interfere with each other. One of the problems that CubeSats have now is they have a lot of qualifications they have to go through because they're designed to fly with very expensive ComSats. And so that just drives the cost up. So the more satellites in terms of raw numbers you put together on one launch, the larger of an integration problem you have.
Just to add, that seems like the point that you made earlier as well is that the advantage to this model is that customers would have access to the schedule on their terms versus the larger launch access companies as well.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Thank you.
Next up is Arnie Sokoloff with Continuum Aerospace.
you do. I'm Arnie Sokolov from Continuum Aerospace. I'm one of the founders and co-CEO. What do we want to do? We want to build a better rocket engine, better hybrid rocket engine using some new technology. We believe there's some obvious needs that are waiting for a product like this. What are the immediate needs? Let's look at them. Here's two of them. Space tourism. I'm sure you've heard at conferences like this and in articles about the tens of millions, hundreds of millions that are being put into this industry, spaceports being built. But there actually is not a suitable engine in terms of safety and operating costs that's available today. Another area that was mentioned, microsatellites. They've been getting smaller and less expensive to build, but the ability to launch them has not changed in a long time. And so there's enormous pent-up demand, and a huge proportion of satellites are not launched. There's a number of future markets that we are convinced, as the advantages of our system is apparent, will have significant penetration. What are those advantages? First of all, there's simplicity. It's simpler by design. That means it's simpler to build, it's simpler to operate, and it's simpler to maintain. It's very controllable. Chief characteristic there is that it can be shut off as required and at the first sign of trouble, which leads into safety. Solid fuel rockets, for instance, in the passenger tourism business, they may never be appropriate. You cannot shut off a solid fuel rocket. Liquid fuel engines, they always have potential for a fuel oxidizer or explosion. I think that's Spaceship One chose hybrid engines primarily for that reason. They are inherently safer. And our particular design, we believe, is demonstrably safer still. They're environmentally friendly. It's nice to be green, but there are a lot of advantages besides just being environmentally friendly for its own sake. It makes it easier to build, to handle, to transport. You don't need fancy environmental permissions to do these things. All of these items feed into life cycle costs. We believe our engines are demonstrably the most cost effective for the user. Who's the team who's going to be building these things? Well, let's look at the principals. So myself and Mike, the co-CEOs, we're engineers with experience in large and small organizations, 20 years experience each. Our chief financial officer is currently financial officer of a publicly listed biotechnology firm, and we have another scientist and two other engineers to round out our team of the principals. But it's not just us. We have an advisory board with some pretty illustrious names. Dr. Philip Lapp, who is one of the founders of Spar Aerospace. They're the people who put together the robotic arms that are operating now on the shuttle and the ISS. Dr. Robert Richards, who I believe is here, and he's a co-founder of the International Space University, and he also has an experiment that will be flying on the next Mars lander. Dr. Kieran Carroll, who recently had his MOST telescope launched. And rounding out our advisory board is a litigator who's taught courses in intellectual property law. We also have partners, one of whom is Corey Klein, who's president of an existing hybrid engine manufacturer, and he more patents than anyone else in the hybrid area. We have our fuel supplier, who is probably the leader in the world, the best scientific team, and we have a unique agreement with them to pursue research and development on our fuel system. We have a number of academic partners, which are good for their abilities, but additionally, they open us up to a large pool of government money, which is available to joint industry academic partnerships. And we have a number of people who are with us, who are to the aerospace market. Building rocket engines is a pretty complex business. You need people with a lot of specialties. We have all these people lined up. We've worked with them before. You'll see the results of that, so that when we're financed, we can hit the ground running. We have a number of people just waiting to jump on board. What have we done? Yes, we researched the technology and researched the market, but here's the key point. We built an engine using the technology. Here's what a hybrid design engine looks like, and here's well, it's not going, can you cue it back one and maybe get the the film going. Cue back one. Well, there it is. Anyways, it's okay. We'll move on to the next slide, I hope. Anyways, that was our hybrid engine. It worked perfectly, unlike the the slide there. It was designed for 1,000 pounds of thrust using a new type of technology, and that's exactly what it delivered. So what are the next steps? We're going to build engines in 3 sizes. Not only build them, we're going to test them repeatedly, and we're going to fly them. Here are the engines. One is a lab scale engine. It's called lab scale. You wouldn't fire it indoors, but it's necessary to be able to do repeated tests, dozens, hundreds of times will be fired. Then we learn about scaling up with an intermediate scale engine. And finally, there's a commercial scale engine. When I say finally, within 18 months, we will be firing this commercial scale engine. To put that in perspective, that engine is larger than the Spaceship One engine, the engine that powered the successful manned X Prize flights. Marketing. Here's the key to our marketing. We're going to demonstrate. We're not just going to show people paper engines, but you'll see on a rapid schedule, we're going to be inviting people down and to watch the engine firings. So we're going to publicize that, and the key thing is we bring them in early and we collaborate with our customers because we're integrating our product into their product. We're the engine supplier. We're not building the whole system. We're selling to them. Why aren't the large companies doing this? Well, their specialty, the large company's specialty is selling very large products to very large customers. At that, and we wouldn't compete with that, but they're not necessarily the place to develop something really new, really pioneering. A small, focused company like ourselves is more likely to be able to carry that off at a lower cost and better time. These companies will get interested once we prove the system. There's some existing hybrid companies. Here are the 3 the ones that build the largest engines in North America. One of them, as I mentioned, DAC partnering with, but they have a considerable investment in current hybrid technology, and it's not clear that they have the resources or the interest to sidetrack into what is a new area that they're not familiar with. There's a number of non-hybrid companies that are of note, and I particularly mentioned SpaceX, and SpaceX is of particular interest just because even before they had flown their first rocket, and of course they still haven't gotten too far with it, they had their manifest filled. This indicates the pent-up demand for reasonable price satellite launch. Here's the development milestones. Obviously, it's too complex to go into any detail, but the key points is within 6 months after full funding, we're firing our small engine. Within 18 months, we have a commercial scale engine. The investor's viewpoint. We're looking for $5.5 million over 2 years. Now, this is a very small part of a large financial plan. I want to point out a few important points. There's basically an 18-month development cycle, then an 18-month commercial ramp-up. We're profitable in year 4 and continue with increasing profitability through year 10. This plan throws off $22 million in, annually in cash on year 10. And by the way, this is based on the Futron study numbers, which in many ways may be seen to be and yields an internal rate of return of 40% and some pretty attractive value propositions at the 5 and 10 year mark. So what's the exit strategy? How do you get your money out? Well, first of all, the preceding spreadsheets were based on independent operations. That means we sell hybrid engines to customers for a profit. And that's a good business, but our expectation is we become more prominent, and especially as we're dealing with larger engines and larger customers, larger firms will probably want to get involved, and one way may very well be licensing. The other thing that's more than likely is once we have proved the technology and the commercial viability, we expect to be considered a very interesting acquisition target by the large players in the space industry. That is the presentation. I'd like to thank you for your time. And I'd also like to say I really would like to meet with each of you individually to go into more detail, both technical and financial, on the project, where we wouldn't be, rushed in this 10-minute forum. Thank you.
Where specifically is the technology breakthrough here, or the IP? You just spend a couple of minutes on that?
I don't want to go into too much detail on that, partly because I would be more forthcoming. Usually we sign a non-disclosure agreement before we go into the technology details. But a key part is we're using a different hybrid fuel, one that is not the conventional, most common is HTPB, which was used in the Spaceship One, and I know that plexiglass was mentioned in one of the other presentations. We're using a different type of fuel, and which hasn't been used by a lot of outfits, really only been used in research testing. And that's the core, and a lot of other features come out of that. The simplicity comes out of that, the reliability comes out of that, a lot of the cost effectiveness comes out of that.
You should know, though, that as venture capitalists, we generally don't sign NDAs.
Well, we have to have different experience. Some people have been very willing. They thought it was a reasonable first step. I'm not sure exactly. We'll have to talk privately exactly what would be required to satisfy you, but we're not trying to be cagey. We simply are not interested at this point, basically pre-financing, in announcing to the world exactly how we're doing it. But I'm sure we can make some arrangements. It's always happened before. We've never not been able to introduce more details on the technology. The investor wasn't interested in making an arrangement.
It seems like you have the ideas for the rocket engine technology under control. Can you tell us anything about the airframes?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. We have a very different model for our company. We're not building airframes. We don't have no intention of building airframes. Now, we may build a very simple rocket just for some test purposes, but our goal, we consider the passenger aircraft industry to be a more appropriate model for a mature new space industry. There's only a few people make aircraft engines, Pratt & Whitney, General Electric, Rolls-Royce, and they're huge companies, right? But they don't build airframes, right? And Boeing and Airbus, huge companies, they just build airframes. They don't build engines, and so on, and neither of those run airlines, and the airlines don't try and build engines. We think that in the long run, that the airline industry model is appropriate, and we are only trying to build rocket engines. We're not trying to build airframes, and that's why so many of these other companies, we're not trying to compete with them. We just say, take a look at us to be your engine supplier. We're focused on that. That's our area of expertise. That's what we're going to maximize the quality on, and we're going to produce something that will be better in your application than something that you will do when you're also trying to do everything else.
How do your recurring costs compare to the recurring costs of a liquid-fueled system? Or let's put it a different way. How would your recurring costs compare to, let's say, Spaceship One, that we have some knowledge of the numbers to?
Yeah, I believe the Spaceship One engine is largely reusable, at least in principle, and ours would be largely reusable. In actual fact, will be less expensive just inherently. Now, the fact is the fuel cost isn't a major part of it, but it will be slightly less expensive. It's reusable, and it's also a simpler design, so it should be simpler to and less expensive to turn it around. And again, the fact that it's greener means all the handling is simpler.
Do you have, I guess, future plans outside of, and you did mention a few future markets outside of nanosats or microsats and space tourism. Are there any serious modifications that you would see to your primary product to expand initial markets potentially if space tourism isn't as big as some might say, or nanosats don't take off like some might say?
Yeah, the reason we are particularly interested in space tourism and nanosats is because those are developing markets. They're not markets where they're not married to existing suppliers. But we think the more traditional markets over time will become interested in our product. One of the areas that I'm particularly interested in that I think it has an opportunity for is replacing hypergolics for instance, on-orbit maneuvering. We believe that it probably will serve as a space restartable engine. Potentially, it's a multiple restart technology. And if you're at all familiar with dealing with hypergolics, they're pretty awful to deal with. If you've seen the space shuttle land, the first thing that happens is a bunch of guys in spacesuits on Earth come out because of if any of that hypergolic fuel has escaped, it's lethal. So I think that's one area among several. And really you have to look at segment by segment. This is why I'd rather have a longer sit down and look in each of the segments and see of the market why this may be a superior technology. I also think it has a, especially for small satellites for in the defense area, has a particular application because it can be very, very fast to go. You don't have to set it up days and months and weeks in advance. And I know the military really doesn't like that sort of schedule.
Just a very quick follow-up. So based on that answer, I would assume that the technology is very flexible. And by being flexible, it can be molded into a variety of applications on a cost-effective basis. Would that be true statement?
Yes, it would. It's a general type of engine. But, and again, we're building the engines much like the engine companies in the aerospace, in the passenger aircraft field. You know, you get the airframe specifications and the technical requirements, and you design the fine points of the engine to suit.
Once your product is developed and tested, what is the sales cycle? Can you tell us something about what are the steps? Who are you selling to? What's their budget constraint and so on?
Well, one of the key elements, I think, to keeping the sales cycle reasonable, since it's obviously not a fast sales cycle, it's not a commodity item, and they also have to integrate our product into their product. And so the key is getting them in very early. So we would intend to bring in all those players that we consider to be at all serious in the space market, and especially the new space market, to come in, see our demonstration engines, talk to them, show them the numbers, and to try and demonstrate to them quite early that our solution is very effective in their application, and then we'd develop it along. The actual time to develop would depend on a number of factors, of course, the size of the engine that's involved, and how close is it to the existing ones that we're developing.
Thank you.
Is there a chance of a competitive threat coming from Asia, Europe? Are there similar research efforts going on there versus, you know, primary focus here locally?
This particular technology, as far as I know, it's only been used, and I could be wrong, in North America. As far as we know, by the way, there's only two people, us and a university, who've ever fired an engine of this size with this technology. I know that it's been looked at in other places. I don't know that it has been. But really, what we are is to consider this rather than as a lab curiosity, as something that ought to be introduced immediately, or as soon as practical, into the market. Thank you. Thank you.
Over the past few years, the foundation has been somewhat of a victim of its own success in that have been so busy running companies that we haven't had time to help do this. We hope that this is just one step along the way for the foundation to serve as a resource to nurture entrepreneurs in this industry, as well as serve as a resource for investors to come in and learn more about this industry. I ask the judges if they can just stick around for a couple minutes if people have questions from them or want to give them a business card or anything else like that. And then we'll tally the results. And then at the banquet tonight, we'll announce the winner. And the winner is going to receive what every entrepreneur wants, which is cold, hard cash. And so Anil's going to be presenting, well, I guess it's two $500 poker chips that you can use however you want. So I want to thank all the entrepreneurs for participating, and as well the judges for being here. And we hope to do this again. Thanks.